rid of all those plan commission members who voted. Now, the mayor does have that authority, but I didn't think that was a good policy decision to do. So I think council members are most directly responsible. I agree it's not an enviable position to be in, to have to come in front of the public at a meeting, but plan commission meetings are open to the public also. It's a public forum. There's nothing different about that. So if it was publicized that this person who's a sex offender is going to be appealing to the plan commission, that may bring people out, just as they may bring them out of the city council. But city council members get elected every 2 years. Be removed from office under certain circumstances. So that's why I think if anywhere, it should be city council. That's my opinion. Another thing I wanted to bring to your attention, if I could, is one part I'm not in favor of is section D. Property owners prohibited from renting real property to certain sexual predators and sexual offenders. I think if you're going to have something like that, it should be, the burden should be on the subject of this ordinance, not property owner. The subject should be able to identify themselves if they're going to move into certain areas, and not, it could be an out-of-town property owner, they just don't know. We have plenty of out-of-town property owners in this town. I think that's an unfair burden on property owners. So, Carl, you were going to say something, I'm sorry.
Scott, you read a list of locations that had been taken off of that map. Could you repeat that again,
please? Public or private parks.
I was just going to say, or you could say what is included. But that's right.
Well, so public or private parks, swimming areas, the library, trails, for example, walking trail, the ATV snowmobile trail, licensed daycare centers, the skating rink, private golf course, and religious properties.
Can I just ask for just a quick discussion on whether or not, again, going back to Chief Johnson's example given, that it's about being in the park, not necessarily some residence, how would people feel about restricting the areas yet removing the safety zones around those areas? Just out of curiosity. Can I ask that?
Oh, sure, anything you want.
Explain again.
So the idea would be that the restriction areas are still there.
Mm-hmm. In your revised map.
But the safety, yes, but the safety zone or the residency restrictions around those areas would be removed.
So
How does that respond?
So the answer to the question is that is within your purview, and you have a wide range of potential amendments to this whole thing. You can have anything from 0 up to the point where we think that it becomes unconstitutional as far as the distance from a identified property, safety zone property.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I was just curious what people have felt about, given the lack of evidence of these residency restrictions actually doing what we are proposing to do. Would we be in favor of restricting those playgrounds, restricting those areas, so that, in the case that Chief Johnson had said, and we could remove a person or have someone removed from those areas if they are present without the residency restriction.
So Aaron, what you're proposing we consider is the revised map with the gray eliminated. So that those would be the safe locations where children, where a sex offender could not physically be present.
Right. Because right now we have both, right? They can't go to those places and
And they can't
they
live in
cannot
those
live
areas.
around those.
Live in the gray areas.
I was just curious.
If we conclude that those are, as I have said, and you have said, that those are the areas where children potentially are most vulnerable, maybe without close supervision, and a sex offender loitering in those locations, or a potential threat to children. Makes sense to me. I don't know about the residency requirement. I mean, I have mixed feelings about that. Because, you know, if you have this gray bubble around these safe zones and someone, you know, is living just on the other side of that gray zone, if you can't make the whole community gray, which we can't, constitutionally, correct?
Yes.
What difference is it?
If I could just add to what Scott said earlier about changing the ordinance, adding and subtracting, you shall have the option to reject the ordinance outright, just not even going with any ordinance. But also you have the option of changing the distance in the safety zones. If we thought 500 feet was just a number that was sort of a compromise number they came up with. Some communities have much more, some communities have less. So it's totally up to what council provides.
And I'll just clarify one thing that Karen had said. With Aaron's proposal, it would prevent presence on this property, not just loitering.
Right, presence, yeah.
Scott, you want to say something?
You know, there was really no magic to 500. It was a nice round figure that seemed reasonable for the size of Washburn. And so that's what we have regionally started with. So whether that is 200 or 800 or, you know, we just thought 500 was a good place to start.
If we're talking about safety, security, or discomfort with the presence of somebody that you just don't feel like you can easily go there for whatever your reason, if somebody lives nearby. I feel like the buffer zone gives you that. 100 feet wouldn't keep somebody from living across the playground that you know has a history, and you can't have your teenage daughter babysitting there because whatever. You know, I just feel like everybody's got a history in there. I feel like there's some comfort in having areas where a person can go to that they have a reason to. I mean, I would be more for more buffer zones, and not saying they, you know, so that it's not so complicated for somebody to have, and you don't have to go and get an appeal to be able to take their kids fishing or walk them to the park. But I feel like the buffer zone would give the police the ability to have those teeth that he's talking about, to be able to say, you're loitering, you're staring, you're making people uncomfortable, this is, you know, maybe it's a misunderstanding, and a warning should do it, but it gives them something to use. just speaking to your distance thing, I just feel like, I thought about the distance thing too, and I felt like 500 was a good number. Some were saying like thousands of feet was the buffer zone.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, unless I missed something. In the buffer zone, the only consideration is residency
And loitering.
and loitering.
Can be in the buffer zone. They can, a person who is a sex offender could be in the buffer zone.
Be there, but not live there.
Right.
Right.
Now, I also do want
But I
to,
thought loitering was still fit in that.
yes,
Okay.
so loitering counts.
Right, and that's what we're looking to avoid, places where people can hang out and I'm thinking about areas like the parks, public spaces, the trails.
That's a
like
safety zone.
Separating,
Right? Isn't that the safety zone? As a
I'm trying to picture like a happy medium between these two maps that give a little more security for, you know, teenage children. You know, and I also don't want it to be difficult for people who, there was a misunderstanding, and it's something they can get past. And hopefully that is rare, and they have support from their community and their
In case, you know, and you're mumbling, not mumbling, when you're processing all of this information as to what works best, do keep in mind that when it comes to the residency, and I had this provision put in for my own sanity, if any property touches the buffer zone, the entire property is ineligible for residency. So do you not want to be in a position of, okay, a half or a quarter of the property is in the buffer zone. Now, is that portion where the house is, or is that, so I don't want to go there. And so the way this works, so the map looks all nice and smooth, but in reality, when it's enforced, when it comes to residency at least, it will follow the property line. Just so everyone is clear on that.
So it would be more expansive than what is on the map.
My only question to that is, now the one was just released, his parents live across from school, that's where he's at. There's another one, like we talked about before, his mailing address is his brother's house, he lives with his sister. One is on supervision, one is not. Now, if the one is not on the lease, if this ordinance comes into effect, the one that's not on the lease, not under supervision, is he gonna have to move, and what about this other one that just got there?
This ordinance could not be applied retroactively to anyone who's already in any location.
But even if we had this ordinance under that provision of that their parents or whatever lived there the year before, so I don't know this individual. Say, for example, someone had a family that parents lived across the street from the school for a number of years, this person was released, they could move into that house legally, right?
Yes.
Under this ordinance, so that, what you suggested wouldn't even apply.
And again, to Tom's point, ordinances like this actually tend to, the research shows, increase the amount of times that someone is living somewhere where they're not. You know what I mean? Or like where their address is not. So, you know, I mean, you know, it's kind of that harm versus good, like how much more danger are we putting people in by these ordinances than making us feel good about these ordinances, you know, like as far as like what does the evidence show. So, you know, it may create some more difficulty in actually keeping track of residents, but, yeah, just before we decide, you know, anything else.
It would put some people at ease.
And I mean, there's obviously a lot to be said for that, and that's where the compromise map is what I'll call it. But I mean, I'm much more comfortable with that map than the original. But at the same time, I'm trying to figure out what actually gets to our goal of keeping people safe And that's the real question. I don't know if these buffer zones actually keep people safe. In fact, the evidence shows that it doesn't, but.
How would council like to proceed? There's been a lot of suggestions thrown out.
Well, as I said earlier, this is the third time this has been a discussion, and it would be really easy to say, well, you know, we've added all these new components and new thoughts about it, let's postpone it and bring it back again. But we've asked the community to respond to us, and we have had a variety of responses. I had none. You know, there was a letter, there were some few emails. Tom, you apparently had more than I or others. But we also don't have a large number of people here speaking to us about it. I think it is our job to make a decision. I think we need to make a decision. I would urge us to make a decision tonight. And to that end, I'll start with a motion. I move that we modify the ordinance that would be more, that would be responsive or reflective of the safety zones that are indicated in the revised map that we have been discussing, that remove the various areas that Scott reiterated a few moments ago, that we continue the residency requirements in those buffer zones, but that the safety zones be only those indicated on the revised map.
I think everything else as is in the ordinance is presented.
As I said, adjusted to reflect, because we would have to take out, as Max and Scott have said, the swimming pool, the library, et cetera, those changes to correspond. And that we also consider, and that I also move that the Planning Commission no longer be the appeal body, but that it come directly to the City Council.
I'll
Is there a
second that.
Okay, moved and second. Any further discussion?
Sonia, could you read that back to us, how
I'm trying to do
you
that.
heard that, so we know what we're voting on? Sure.
The motion was to move the ordinance to reflect the safety zones in the revised map and to connect, continue that, I got wrong here, the residency in the buffer zone, and I have down safety zone, I'm not sure why I wrote that down.
Up in the buffer zones,
Buffer
around the
zones,
safety
around the
zones.
safety zones. And that the appeal should go to the city council, not to the planning commission.
So in other words, anywhere in this ordinance number 20-001 where it references the plan commission, that should be replaced with city council.
Mhm.
That is your.
Correct.
Any further discussion? Or are you hesitant?
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, now that we're talking about needing to come in for appeals, and we're thinking about people that have either been wrongly accused. Hopefully that's rare, because I think there are plenty of people that suffer without ever having justice. But I do want for those that need to move on with their lives and need their family, I want that to be easier. So smaller areas, safety zones, I think that helps. I think I'm curious if they have to come in person to city council. Is this something that can be on the agenda, be voted on, and have someone here to represent them? Or is that an option? And we're talking about,
I would say yes, that an individual always has ability to have someone be there with them. Let me just check and make sure that that doesn't.
Doesn't currently say they have to be in person, does it?
No.
I don't think so.
There's a hearing, so that individual would presumably present their position at hearing. It also allows for consideration of written or other submitted comments, so an individual could make written comments to that effect. I would say, it'd be my opinion that an individual could hire an attorney to be there on their behalf to present their position for them.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments before we vote? Last call. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. That was a very difficult discussion. And consider. Carl, are you on call?
No.
It would create an issue if you left. Discussion action on administration goals and objectives for 2020 and review of 2019 goals. Mr. Hoover, would you like anything else to comment? Your evaluation?
Well, so I've listed what the goals were for 2019. I am happy to discuss any of those points and provisions as to what happened last year and what worked, what didn't. Happy to further discuss any of those. And then I have listed proposed goals for this year. So there are basically 2 times a year where the council can spend a little more time on planning, and that is right now when we're discussing what the goals are, and then during the budget process, we plan a little more and figure out what we're going to pay for. So given that we generally have 12 or 13 meetings out of the year, this is one of those times where we can kind of discuss amongst yourselves what the priorities should be. So I would entertain any questions, comments, or concerns on the 2019 goals.
I guess they think you're wonderful, Scott. Okay, anyone like to bring up?
I have a question.
Karen?
Scott, at the end of your memo, you talk about, it would be good for the council to come to agreement as to whether they believe the priorities should be. Are you suggesting that you want some guidance or some input in terms of prioritizing the proposed 2020 goals, or not?
On the 2020 goals, my request here is that I believe the council should, here at the end of this discussion, approve a set of goals. If there is a particular priority, they can apply that. I have not applied a priority. There was one goal where I do want the council, and this is related to the sidewalk issue, to provide some direction on that, because we have, in a roundabout way, been discussing this issue probably for the past 10 plus years without a clear direction as to where we are heading. Before we start taking specific actions related to that issue, I'd like to have a little more clear direction as to where does the community want to go with the sidewalk issue, because it is difficult. We have, you can take this winter we're having right now as one example of how difficult it would be for us if we had an ordinance basically with sidewalks throughout the community, and we required the entire community to clear those sidewalks. I believe it would be very difficult to get compliance with that. It has been difficult enough to get compliance on Bayfield Street. Personally, that affects me. I live on Bayfield Street. I completely understand. I would trade my sidewalk and snow and ice with anyone who lives in the residential area because it's not laden with all the salt that melts it and turns it into ice. But we do the best that we can given those conditions. But there was certainly, I don't believe, any realistic expectation that an individual could have removed all the snow on their sidewalks after the big snow that had occurred this season.
But as I understand, I mean, I agree with you, but as I understand in the sidewalk issue, it's really two issues, and each issue has two parts. There's Bayfield Street sidewalks, maintenance, and removal of snow. And there are other sidewalks throughout the community, and they have two parts, maintenance and removal of snow. Correct? Okay.
So
Two issues of sidewalks, each issue having two aspects to it.
correct.
Or probably more that I haven't thought of, but those two primary.
So the prevailing thought on this issue has been, we've got Bayfield Street probably as good as we're going to get under the understanding that the property owners are responsible for the removal. There will be times, like this season, where the city may have to come in and assist because it is physically impossible without heavy equipment. Keeping that in mind, if the city wants to mandate, expand or improve sidewalks in other locations in the city, say up Washington Avenue is a logical location, potentially expanding over to connect to the schools or something of that nature. Is it a reasonable expectation that the city would be able to enforce the removal of snow in those areas? Will we have a mechanism to pay for that? Now, I had provided previously two methods, alternative methods besides special assessment that could be used to pay for sidewalk, but the bottom line is people would either be paying more in taxes, and is that acceptable for sidewalks that may not be usable all year round? And before we start taking actions to enforce the maintenance of sidewalks and so forth, I think we should decide where are we going as a city. Do we want sidewalks? Do we want sidewalks only in certain areas? Do we want them everywhere? Or only in certain areas, or not at all? And tell me what you want, because I think how we approach the issue will change based on what you want.
You want us to be able to answer those questions.
Yes, Tom.
As far as the sidewalks, I know like the city of Ashland takes care of the main street. They remove the snow off of those. These other ones, I think sidewalks going up Washington Avenue should be fixed, and probably Third Avenue and Fourth Avenue, which students use, which would be a safety issue. Other than that, leave these sidewalks alone, because there's a lot of places where there's no curb and gutter, there's no sidewalk, besides that the homeowner had put sidewalk there, and they didn't cut the grass or whatever, they're covered, so they've been covered for 10 to 20 years, some 30 years. It would get too expensive to put sidewalks for the whole city, and then jack up everybody's taxes just to pay for the sidewalks, when they'd rather have the roads fixed.
Sorry. I agree with Tom that I think there should be particular places, and that can be decided by the council. That, like Washington comes to mind. I've been trying to advocate for that crosswalk on, I think it's on Seventh Avenue, by the elementary school, at least just one street so they have somewhere to cross. But, you know, so I see like strategic placement, but yeah, when you look at, you know, a lot of the west side of town, for instance, I mean, there's no sidewalks, and we'd be putting them in, and I just, I just don't see like a logical, you know, way of going about kind of blanketing the city and sidewalks. So I think it would have to be one of the strategic kind of, and that being said, if these are city, if we're choosing these places, I do feel like we have to finance them differently. I don't think a special assessment is ever really be considered if normally in the way that it is right now. I mean, I feel like it's, you know, just kind of unfair, to be honest, to ask only the people on these thoroughfares to essentially pay for the replacement of sidewalks. So we discussed in the finance committee, you know, could we put a plan in place where this is something that we budget for and we do, you know, with a plan, a strategic plan, like, okay, this year we're doing this block or, you know, what have you, and we kind of budget for it as a city expense rather than a residential. That was just my opinion. My thought.
I have one other thing to add to that. Washington Avenue is gonna be real expensive because trees are gonna have to be removed. I mean, you can see where the tree is growing up, it's too big in the boulevard, and it's pushed up and broke up the sidewalk. You don't have to go far to find it either. There's probably 15, 20 trees at least that would have to be removed. I mean, totally remove that, to come in and grind the stumps, and I'm not sure how much that is. But I did hear one guy say it cost him $1,000 to have a tree cut down on the sides of that one spruce in my yard.
Sounds about right. It's big. And it's mentioned before, when you start chopping trees down, people get pretty upset. Scott, you wanted to say something?
Given the conversation that I've heard right now, what I'm hearing basically is, at least from two council members, is you would like a plan presented to the council that would identify areas where we should consider having good, well-maintained sidewalks within the city. And then, along with that plan, basically either a sub-plan or some other mechanism as to how to potentially finance that without special assessment of property owners.
And just so you know, if we do such a thing, the people who were special assessed in the past, you will be hearing from them.
Yep.
For warning. Yes.
And Aaron, you didn't say specifically, but if we were to receive that plan with an ongoing multi-year finance plan, would you also then consider those as responsibility of the city to maintain and clear of snow? Or you're not?
No, I was
Okay.
thinking primarily, I just feel like it would be quite burdensome on any property owner on the street to, I mean, like, I don't know how, you know, how affordable that is. And I totally understand, I mean, we've special assessed in the past. But if we're choosing strategic streets because we find them to be city, like to, you know, value to the city, I just feel like then, you know, it seems like that's a city expense, but,
City expense to do,
just to
maintain,
replace,
to
but
replace.
absolutely for the
But-
removal, I mean, I just feel like that, you know, that's something that, you know, we could, I'm certainly not, you know, against the city maintaining it, but if that's something that's
You
reasonable for.
just weren't,
for
you
city.
haven't thought.
I haven't
That's
talked about
okay.
that one. I was speaking one of
Just the removal and
the,
replacement.
right, yeah.
So if we could just step back,
Okay.
we jumped quite a bit into 2020. We never really addressed at all 2019. Scott,
did.
You just said that everything's fine.
You said it.
I was just throwing out a comment, but I didn't hear anything from council members. If that's fine, okay, then let's continue with 2020. I just want to make sure we did it in a logical step. Okay, so 2020, please continue.
So a plan for key residential areas, key traffic areas, and foot traffic areas, correct?
And that's my understanding. Keep in mind that a plan is a plan.
Yeah, no, I'm just,
And, until the council would approve it, it's simply a draft. And as far as financing, we would be looking at, all options, and of course, everything would be on the table, again, when that would be discussed in the future.
the reason I think that would be very helpful is that we have had, as we can remember, people come and talk to us about the sidewalks. A variety of locations identified as priorities for people that came and talked to us. If we had a plan, at least we would have something that we could share with the residents of the city to say, okay, this is what we're thinking about. What do you think about?
Right.
Because we have heard from some, but I would like to also hear from additional people, and that would give us a good starting point, I think.
This is how I would prefer to address this issue as opposed to dealing with various groups coming with telling us how
Right, well, that's what I'm saying.
we should do it. Because in going through the season again and knowing some of the issues that have come up in the past, I think if we spend our efforts on enforcement, that will not be productive, because if such a plan would be approved, part of that plan would also include the eventual removal of said sidewalks from areas that are not considered a priority.
Would it have to?
Would it have to? I can't say that it would have to, but I think there may be some legal obligations for us to consider.
Are you saying that if a resident has a functioning sidewalk in good repair, but it's not on the plan of the key areas where we will have sidewalks, that sidewalk would be removed?
It's something that we will have to discuss as part of this process.
I think half the sidewalks like on Pine Street and going up 7th Avenue, those are covered by grass. They've been covered by grass for 25, 30 years.
But that's not true of all sidewalks.
No, I mean, those should be vacated.
And we can get into that later,
Yeah.
not tonight, because we don't have all the answers. I think there may be reasons legally abandoning legal sidewalks. So
What
we're
does
not
that
responsible.
I don't even know what that means.
To be continued.
Okay.
That's why we have an attorney.
But
Go into detail on that.
we jumped over Bayfield Street. We haven't talked, did you also need input on Bayfield Street?
At this point, my recommendation is we leave the current policy for Bayfield Street in place.
Which is residents are or business owners are responsible for clearing,
Correct.
even though that did not occur this year.
It has,
It has.
it did not occur for the large snowfall.
Right.
But for other snowfalls, we have now enforced that.
And just a question for information's sake. Letters were sent to those areas where Bayfield Street sidewalks had not been cleared, correct?
Letters were sent to properties
Property
that,
owners had not cleared.
that had not cleared, but had not, those properties that were not already cleared once by the city from the big snowfall were exempted. Because we hadn't finished removing
Okay,
snow
that's my question.
from
Thank you.
some of those
Okay.
areas yet. They have now all subsequently been removed.
So they were exempt.
Correct.
Exempted because of the extent of the original, the large 31-inch.
Correct.
Thank you.
Well, I think that as a business person, it's only in your best interest if you can't get the mountainous part of the snow along the street level, at least be able to get in and out of your building.
Right,
Your
but-
business, but oddly enough, there were locations in town where that didn't take place. I found it amazing.
But not all property owners were businesses
Right.
on Bayfield Street.
But there were some businesses
Well,
that didn't bother
right, I
getting.
mean, that's
that.
the
That was
aspect
a-
of it.
I mean, the responsible business owners were out there.
Yeah, right.
Digging, yes, Tom.
I have one other question regarding that. What is the charge if the city cleans off the sidewalk? I heard somebody say it was $12.50 was the percentage of it. Like, that don't sound right to me, but.
We have, I don't recall off the top of my head the exact rate, but it is a function of the equipment and the person time involved in that, divided by how long that it takes and round that to figure. So it will vary based on the size of the property, unless we go to a citation method. So
And was anyone's had to pay a penalty this time around?
we will have those, yes, they have to be filled out, so.
And then we'll have some idea.
Okay,
We can get that information to you.
thank you.
Still working on that, yet.
I don't think it's $12.50 though.
The other component on, the one thing that will affect Bayfield Street is planning for the highway reconstruction.
Of course, yeah.
And so sidewalks will not be a covered expense except where the DOT would otherwise have to remove them for whatever purpose. So the city would be required for that. So we will have to consider any sort of financing plan, either the special assessment component or adding that into the mix as to how these would all be paid for, because they will all have to be replaced. And the council is aware, I have not released additional information to the public yet, which will be coming. But basically all the sidewalks from one end to the other will be removed in this project. That is our understanding from discussions that we've had with the DOT at this time, so.
And then the homeowners are responsible for the laterals.
That is a topic that the council will have to bring up as well. Currently, and that goes into the provision where we have to spend more time on the Bayfield Street project. But per regulations currently, homeowners are responsible for their laterals. Now, what we have been discussing behind the scenes here is we believe that all laterals along Bayfield Street will have to be inspected or televised as to their condition. And the council will eventually have to make a determination as to whether or not only damaged laterals would be mandated to be replaced, or would we require all laterals to be replaced? We can't quite answer or give you a recommendation on that because we will have to get a little further along in the engineering to determine if there's an elevation change of the main, it may be required that laterals are replaced,
Regardless of their age.
regardless of their age.
Because I'm sure there's probably some copper, but I would be willing to bet that most of them are galvanized.
We would be doing, we'd have to do lead tests, and that's gonna be, we're looking at that as part of the meter replacement project as well, and how we can do that. So we have both water laterals and the sewer laterals, which would be the ones that would be televised.
And as I understand it, in the best case scenario, those laterals, unless they've been replaced since the last project, which was in the early 70s, it could be considerably older. We don't
Correct.
know that right now. They could be 100 years older now.
I know we don't have any, wooden water lines, I know that.
There are plenty of clay ones around residential that are basically being held together by the soil. And that's what they said, that when they took the soil out, they just disappeared.
So, in further question to that now, if we find out there is, these are pipes are older, and a lot of those laterals are lead, because we do a lead test, would we be able to apply for that grant?
Well, and that's why there's a lot of planning with this, and we have to do a lot of these things in advance, because we have to get those questions answered. And we would certainly be seeking whatever funding sources would be available to assist with these issues.
Right, because I know like if they're lead, there's enough lead, like Ashland gets 300,000 a year in lead, remediation money.
So, and we would certainly explore that. The first question is, do we actually have lead laterals? We know we don't have lead mains,
Right.
but do we have lead laterals? That's question number one, which should be first priority. Something that we would seek to probably get done this year.
Okay, anything else on the priorities for 2020? Hot items that our attorneys just champion the bid to get at? No. Anything else? So are you looking for a motion to approve your 2020?
Yes.
So is there a motion to approve this 2000?
Do you want specific vision made now? I mean, or do you just want to bring this to our attention that you would like more direction eventually on the sidewalk issue? I mean, this is something that's been kind of dropped in recent months, so.
I would, if you would like to make it specific, the more
It sounds
specific
like
that it
that's what
is,
you're
yes,
asking for.
the better.
Because I feel like it's a lot to come up with just, you know, not all of us here, and, I mean, if we could
Yes.
break it down, it would be nice to, like, address this.
Well, one thing we could do, if you want to get into, is maybe have a city council retreat with all members there to discuss the fine points over a couple hours, just that one or two topics.
I think that could be
Maybe
helpful
council
if
do that.
you, yeah, I think that'd be helpful to discuss a lot of things that.
Okay, I can start working on that. It would be after the election,
Need more
after the spring election.
Move to approve the 2,000 goals for the city administrator.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved to second. Any other changes or additions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next, discussion and action on Chamber of Commerce use of Thompson's West End Park, Memorial Park, Rooftop Park, City Garage Lot, et cetera, for homecoming activities July 24th through 26th, 2020. This is something that comes up pretty much every year in various versions. You have information in front of you. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve the request.
Second.
Any other comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Next is the alcohol licensing matter versus approval of Class B beer and Class C wine alcohol license application, Ronald Piercy, Carlin / Yellowbird Gallery petitioner. Is there a motion to approve Mr. Piercy's application?
Move to approve the application.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
That should be clarified for the record that it's approved contingent.
Oh, sorry. Approve the contingent on the inspection of the police, because the police are the zoning.
Yes.
Chief of police
inspection.
make sure it's to his satisfaction. Is that still agreeable to council?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I missed that. I miss that every time. Next, we have an approval of bartender licenses number 21 through 26 and 21, 27. And you have a note from the chief of police regarding one of the applicants, that he is seeking to exclude one of the applicants.
Can I add that that applicant is not in the 46, 47?
Okay. So it's the 40.
It's a different.
Okay. Move to approve, is there a motion to approve number 46 and number 47?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And then we have the, which one is it? One that the police chief was asked to deny. Is there a motion to make a motion to deny? How is the council like, you can approve or deny this applicant?
I move to deny the applicant.
I'll second that.
Do we need to identify someone?
We're approving the denial.
I don't know, is there an application number?
Right.
We can put an application number on it.
Okay.
We can make this application 48.
I think it should be some sort of identified. So, number 48 as described by Chief Ken Johnson. How's that? There's a move to deny. Is there a second? I missed that. Tom,
No.
thank you.
Can I ask though, I haven't run into one of these.
It rarely happens.
Do we, I mean, I know we can deny, that's, that's obviously here in the ordinance, but like, as far as our decision to deny is, I don't see any information here other than prior, alcohol violations. Do we even know what,
The applicant did not reflect that they've had violations, so they did not identify that they had them on their application.
And you're supposed to do this, they falsify their application.
Correct.
okay,
That's one thing.
gotcha.
And then it's that according to the ordinance, number 7-2-34, paren D, in your binder, is in it, whether you consider this to be a habitual law offender for this licensing purpose. In all my years on council, I think we denied maybe one or two other people in 15 years. Rarely occurs.
Are they able to reapply?
There is an appeal process.
Okay.
I was going to ask our attorney, how many years has to go by before they, since they had, it's not been all that long ago, and this person is somewhat young, and they were underage drinking not that long ago, so how many years till they're sort of,
Well,
okay,
just pursuant to the ordinance language, it's a certain number of offenses within the last 5 years.
okay, so 5
That
years.
conviction likely will always be discoverable by law enforcement.
Right.
But then it's up to the decision-making body. Well, you're 55 years old, is it relevant that you had an underage ticket when you were 16? Probably not. But yeah, just as far as our ordinance goes, it looks back 5 years.
If this person is relying on this job, I want to assume that she may have had an opportunity to come and present her case for approval. But how long would it take if this is denied and she needs a job? How long would it take for her to appeal this? And, I mean, what does that process look like?
That's my concern as well.
Next city council meeting, as fast as that?
Potentially, yes.
I would assume they would be released from their job, they couldn't sell liquor, and it's a liquor selling business.
That's what I mean, but if that's,
I have the same concern whether denying the person a job and then using employment.
right, this might be her,
I think she left over for some other reason.
I don't know, was
Rumor.
it employed?
And the rumor mill said she left because they were giving her hassle about being pregnant.
I guess that's that business's issue. As a city, we do not want to get involved in that
Right.
private
No,
business
I just-
practices.
Is it safe to assume that this person knew well enough and could have been here to explain this, or?
Yeah, this matter was noticed publicly on the agenda.
Yeah, if it's recommended denial, then,
The police chief was recommended to deny.
Well, she's
And
got-
just, I believe that for an appeal of a council decision, there must be a notice of appeal filed with Scott within 15 days. So then that can be on the agenda for the next meeting to reconsider. And that's my understanding without having the ordinance in front of me.
If this is denied, she will receive formal notice of that denial, which then she'll be given the appeal rights in that letter.
So it's been moved and seconded to deny this applicant. Voting yes, it's to deny, no, it's not deny. Double negative.
thanks for clarifying.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You have denied this person's.
She has to get her application feedback as well.
Should I entertain the motion to go to the closed session?
So moved.
Will be closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent C, personnel matters following which council may reconvene in open session to take up any action that may be necessary on closed session items. This is a roll call vote.
Colonel Borgard,
Yes.
Laura Tulowitzki,
Yes.
Aaron Austin,
Yes.
Tom Nymus,
Yes.
Karen Spears Novacek.
Yes.
Passes. We will take a 1 or 2 minute break. So